Hi, guys. My name is Danielle Ponder. Welcome to my podcast. This is called Light the Mic, and this is officially our first episode. Super excited to get this going. So, for this first episode, I just want to kind of go through who I am, what I've been through, a little bit about me, and what has motivated me to start this podcast and what we're going to be talking about on here and what to look forward to. So, welcome to Light the Mic. So, as I stated earlier, my name is Danielle. I started this podcast here just recently. This is, like I said, our first episode. So, I really have been moved and I want to say spiritually led to start this and, just to share some of the things that I've experienced and come together as one body. To be honest with you, this kind of all started with the Charlie Kirk assassination. This man I never knew, I hadn't heard of prior to this happening. And to be honest with you, I don't know how I didn't hear about him. Maybe just caught up, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But it was the craziest thing that I've never experienced something like it. Of course, the videos were just going crazy on the internet, and there was just such a line that was drawn, and in my opinion, that is still drawn today, that we're still seeing the effects of, we're still seeing the consequences of, and we're seeing people trying to fight for the truth and them getting verbally reprimanded for it, and freedom of speech is something that our country is built on, where we are built on freedom of speech. It's kind of the pinpoint of some of our values as a country. So anyway, it was the craziest thing. I hadn't heard of him prior to this happening, and I watched the videos, and I will never forget those ever. And then I started just deep diving into what he was about, what he stood for, what he believed in, and what he fought for. This man that I had never known before, but got to know through his debates and videos, I found myself intensely and prolongingly mourning and grieving for this man that I had never met, never known. And I realized that I felt this deeply and this strongly about it, emotionally and physically. Physically too, because as Christians, the Bible tells us that we are all of one body. We are in one body under Christ, and that is the church. And it's as though I felt that pain from our body losing such a strong and morally tall individual in a positive way. Somebody that wanted to do the right thing when nobody was looking. Somebody that, no matter what opposition came against him, preached the word of Jesus and preached the salvation of Jesus. And so after the assassination and after all of these conspiracies came out, and people are, like I said, they're divided. It's one side against the other. I realized that people get so caught up in focusing on all of the wrong things. Well, I shouldn't say wrong. Don't let me say wrong, but things that are meant to distract us. So I want to get on here now. I feel it is the most imperative now more than ever to let people know that Jesus is very real. Jesus loves you. And through my testimony and the testimony of people that I plan to have on this podcast, we have such faith in Christ because we have seen the devil. I was a meth addict for the better portion of 10 years, something I never thought that would have befallen me. And that's just to say, that's a prime example right there that addiction does not discriminate. Addiction can affect anyone at any time, anywhere. So let's just backtrack a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on me. I was born here in Missouri, and whenever I was a baby, my biological father, he ended up, him and my mom had went to court, and I don't know. Anyway, long story short, he gave up his rights to me, and then told people I was not his child, and so on and so forth. So, and I found that out whenever I was 10. I had a dad that adopted me when I was, I think, about 3, and he raised me until I turned 18, and then he left, and I haven't spoke to him in quite some time now. My biological father, I found out about this whenever I was 10, and I would say that just a combination of that, of both of those, really. Um, I always had really strong abandonment issues growing up, and I also, I was kind of a troubled kid. I mentally, really. Um, and I remember at the earliest age that I've ever heard of, I was probably 10 or 11. I remember being in 5th grade and having a physical attraction to women, and, my classmates, other girls. And I didn't know what that meant. I was a kid, I was young. Well, and fast forward to about 6th grade, I had my first, girl crush, and I told somebody, and it ended up, leaking out into school. Small town, and kids talk, and kids will be kids. Um, but anyway, so that kind of made my school years a little bit rough for a while. I was, bullied, and things happened. So my school years were a little bit rough on me. Things got better in high school, but once I left high school, my dad that had raised me, he had left and was doing his own thing, and I was going to go to college, and I had moved up there, and I ended up moving back, and I would say, shortly after that, I started, getting into drinking heavily socially, but I was drinking quite frequently, and then one thing led to another as things progressed in my drinking. Then I started, um, taking pills, and one thing led to another, and I was doing heroin and meth, but my drug of choice was meth. And, in this podcast, I just want to forewarn everybody, we are going to keep this very raw and not going to hold anything back. Of course, we're going to keep things appropriate, but, um, things might be a little, in some of our testimonies, I want us to talk about the evil that we've seen. I want us to talk about, what we've been through, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I want people to understand that this battle that we face, everything that we battle every single day, there is a spiritual warfare going on around us 24/7. 24/7, we have a spiritual warfare happening all around us, and we are subjects in that warfare as well. So with that being said, my favorite drug was, and ended up being meth, and I did ended up being an IV user. Now, whenever I met the Lord for the first time, it was before my addiction. Growing up, and I remember being all the way until about 18 years old, I was an atheist, and I didn't really believe, what is there after, you know what I mean? Kind of a cliche atheist, but I remember, I never really grew up in church. And my family, they had just started going to this church that my adopted dad's family was going to. And I actually, was kind of starting to get into it and everything. My first love broke my heart in high school, and of course, as a teenager, I thought it was the end of the world. But I ran away from home, and I had planned on killing myself that night. And this was when I was 17 years old. I hadn't really drove or anything like that in town. I wasn't good with directions. I had just gotten my license. I got my license late. I hadn't really drove my car anywhere for real. Didn't know where anything was at. And I ran away from home one night and left suicide notes, and took a knife with me. And, looking back, I regret what I put my mom through. I regret what I put my family through the most. Um, but it's the craziest thing, because I think, underlying, I think every person really has a fundamental idea of God, right? So we're humans, and we're born with some sort of fundamental idea that there's something bigger and greater and more powerful and more holy than we are. And on that night, when I just felt so desperate, and I felt like, I needed something, somebody, I was crying in the middle of the night, screaming out to anything that would listen. And I was just aimlessly making turns that night, just aimlessly making turns. And mind you, this was, I want to say, probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember ending up, as I'm praying and screaming into the night, I remember ending up in the parking lot of the church that my family had just started going to. And, maybe, you could chalk it up to, maybe my subconscious remembered the directions, and maybe it did. Maybe it did, But to me that night, that was an answer. That was an answer whenever I needed something the most. And I thank God that, as a teenager, feeling those hormonal emotions of heartbreak, and going through the motions of all the puberty and everything that you go through as a kid, I thank God that I did not make an irrational bad decision that night. I'm so very thankful to be here now. As I said, this was before my addiction spiraled out of control. um, that was the first time I met the Lord. Well, when I started drinking and started using drugs, I think I think at the core of it, honestly, the reason that I started doing all of those things, it started socially, but I think I was looking for acceptance, um, anywhere that would have it. And I felt like I was accepted in the drug world. I felt like, you know, these people weren't going to judge me. And these drugs, they made me feel good. They made me not think about, my abandonment issues. It made me not think about, why I didn't like myself, or why I thought I was this or that. And and something that I struggled with my whole childhood. Well, once it started and everything, I always struggled with my attraction to women. I struggled with it really bad, especially after, meeting the Lord and everything. Now, do I think that the Lord would condemn me and send me to hell solely based on that? To be honest, I don't know. I don't know, but that was something that I had struggled with, right? So I escaped all these emotions. I escaped all of these things by covering it up with the drugs, and the drugs made me feel good. They made me feel like I was on top of the world, man. And every time I would crash, I felt myself getting more and more desperate. As every come down came, the level of desperation climbed. And I can honestly say I have done some very regrettable things as a result of addiction. Um, I've robbed people. I've robbed people. I've I've done very terrible things when I was in addiction. I got in trouble with the law. I have half a dozen, give or take, different misdemeanors. I was mean to my grandparents. I yelled at them. I made them cry. I've hurt people. I've gotten into fights. I've almost been killed. There were times so desperate in my addiction and so lonely. I remember I was awake for probably 2, 3 weeks. I remember not having a place to shower, not having a place to use the restroom, not having any money, not having a vehicle, walking the streets in the middle of the night, the clothes that I've had on for 6 days straight, waking up in a jail cell wondering what I did this time. I've almost killed myself more times than I can say. I used to self-harm very, very badly. But let me tell you something, in the midst of all of this, these little things would happen that, in the Bible it says, and I want to say it's Hebrews, somewhere in Hebrews, that be mindful the way that you treat people, for you never know when you're entertaining an angel. And I think that I've had moments like that. Looking back now on my life, I think I've had moments like that, where I there was a situation that it was just out of the blue, just out of nowhere. You know, um, for instance, there was one night I was, doing some regrettable things to, feed the addiction, and there were some people that I didn't know. One guy, cliche name, John Smith. I mean, just the clicheest of cliche names. um, and we were all in bad situations. We were doing bad things, um, and out of nowhere, the next morning, we were all, fiending to get, you know, our hands on some more drugs, and it was the weirdest thing. This man, John Smith, he took me and the other girl that was hanging out with us, and I remember being in a car and him being in the driver's seat, and I don't even know what we were talking about prior to this. And I remember him just getting so mad and upset. And from my understanding, I think he was getting high also, but he just got so upset and so mad. And he said, "If you remember anything from this conversation, I want you to remember that I was sent from God and we need help. You need help." And then he said something about my grandfather. And, anybody that actually knew me knew that my grandfather, my grandparents, they were just very, very special to me, very, very special to me. My grandpa, he would have gave his life to save me and to save addicts. Like, he was very passionate about helping addicts. And he said something about my grandpa, and this guy I didn't know from Adam, didn't know him from anywhere, met him through a guy that, it was, the drug circle, the way it goes. And I never seen him after that. He disappeared off my Facebook Messenger, never seen him after that. It's little moments like that, and I can remember other moments in different parts of my addiction being in a trap house. And if you know what a trap house is, but I remember this trap house with no electricity, no water, and you're in the midst of just darkness and chaos, and you're praying in your head, and and you're like, God, I need to get out of here. I need a sign, and this is what I'm doing at this time. And it was the craziest thing, something you would never see in a trap house, okay? Something you'd never see there. I looked down into the half-stained carpet, and all this, crap is everywhere. There's no lights. And I looked down, and, like the little pendants that go on a necklace, not the necklace part itself, but just the pendant, there was a little cross pendant just stuck, shoot, skirt, right in the carpet, right by my feet in the midst of me praying in my head in this trap house with no running water and no electricity and no nothing. Like, it's just little things like that, and if you know what I'm talking about. I know that you know what I'm talking about, because I guarantee you that each one of you watching has had moments like that nobody else will know why it is significant to you, or why it is important, or why it increases your faith. Because to an outsider looking in, it's just that, oh, it's just a coincidence, but to you, you know better. To you, you know what that connection is with the Lord, and you know what your heart is telling you. So little moments like that would happen all throughout the addiction that I was afflicted with. And to be honest with you guys, I truly, right hand to the Lord, I truly was 1000% convinced that I was going to die there. And I had succumbed to that fate. I had accepted it. I was content with it. I had succumbed to it. I was the worst kind of junkie that you could imagine. I would have crawled over my dead mother's body to get my hands on another bag, is how bad I was. It was bad. It was bad. And only by the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ am I here. By the grace of God only am I here. I promise you, by the grace of God. The first time, guys, let me tell you something. The first time that I ever tried these hard drugs, meth, heroin, cocaine, all of these things, the first night I ever tried any of these, I tried them all in one night, and I did a lot of it. I should have died that night. That night, amongst dozens of other nights, should I have died. But the Lord, but God is all I have to say. But God. God is not done with you yet, and He was certainly not done with me yet. That being said, that and the Charlie Kirk assassination were my two biggest motivations for starting this podcast. Is, I want people to know that there are people out there that relate to them. A lot of addicts, a lot of us addicts say, if you don't understand, if you don't know what I'm going through, you'll never understand what I'm going through. If you'll never know. And that's true. If you've never suffered with this, if you've never known what it's like to be addicted to drugs and alcohol, you won't understand. It's a different playing field. It's a different ball field. It's difficult to understand. But God, an addict or an alcoholic, somebody afflicted with that, when you witness that evil and that destruction and that chaos that the devil causes through that drug for that individual, it destroys their life, their family, their home, their future, their hopes, their dreams, their securities. It destroys everything. And what does the Bible tell us about the enemy? The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But where we get confused is the devil's not going to come to you with this red face and horns. Isaiah 14:12 tells us, "Oh, how you have fallen, O bright shining star." Don't forget the devil was the angel of light. He's not going to come to you looking like the devil. He's going to come to you disguised as everything that you have ever wanted. And that's where we must have discernment. I want to share as much as I can on my story, on what's happening in the world, and I want to engage. And I'm going to have testimonies on here. You know, things that people can relate to. So whenever the last time I had relapsed after about 11 months sober. And I just went completely off the deep end, just ballistic. And I ended up catching some felonies, and I went to prison. And, you know, I'm going to tell you something. Prison was the single most amazing thing that could have happened to me, truly. I drew closer to the Lord, and I recommitted my life to the Lord, and I decided that I didn't need to get out right away, that I was not ready. I didn't need to come back out on the streets because I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. So what I did was I decided to go back to the IPO in prison and to close my file. And if you don't know what that means basically is that you're giving up your opportunity and your chances at parole. So instead of wanting to go see the parole board and have my chance to get out a little bit earlier than my conditional release date, I decided to pass and take my case to my conditional release date. So essentially, I decided to stay in prison longer than I needed to in order to ensure that I wasn't going to do the same thing over and over again. And if you know what I mean, like I remember in the midst of all this, like I didn't want to use, like I passed the threshold of fun a long time ago, and it just becomes a necessity in your mind that you just have to follow. It's an obsession that you just chase after and chase after and chase after. And I remember there were times whenever I would use, and there would be tears streaming down my face because I didn't want to use anymore. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to let everybody down anymore. I didn't want to look at myself in the mirror and see my face sunken in and my eyes black as coal. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see the demon coming out. That's the most horrific thing to see. The devil's got you at that point, And I fully believe too that drugs and alcohol, they open some sort of spiritual door. They open a spiritual door that you can't even really explain, but you know that it's there, right? So the only time that this has ever happened to me, I'm going to tell you a story. The only time this has ever happened to me is whenever I was using drugs and living the wrong kind of lifestyle. So I remember whenever I would be, I'd come off of a bender and I'd pass out, and I'd be out for like a day or two. And I remember I would have this happen. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be fully awake. I would not be able to move a muscle. I would have sleep paralysis, complete sleep paralysis, and I wouldn't be able to move. And the only time that this has ever happened to me, I promise you, was whenever I was using and I was living an evil lifestyle. And I 1000% believe that I was being oppressed by demonic forces. Drugs, alcohol, the kind of evil that we see, it's very real, you guys. It's very real. And I want to bring attention to that. I want I want to bring as many people to the Lord Jesus as I can. And I hope that, I hope that this reaches a lot of people. I really want to bring hope and bring that strength to other people and let them know that they are not alone. You are not alone. And I thought, like I said, I thought that I was going to die there, you guys. I thought that I was. And seeing where the Lord has brought me now